As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and some of the things that we scroll through on Twitter, I call it doom scrolling because we're seeing so much of the absolute filth and the tragic consequences of the leftist woke ideology that is infiltrating all of our institutions. And this was a headline that's actually a little bit older, but has risen more to attention through the post-millennial and a few of my friends that are tweeting about it. Billboard Chris, so if you're not following him, he's excellent. He tweeted this: an 18-year-old boy died when doctors tried to create a vagina for him using part of his colon. His colon was used because puberty blockers stopped growth of his genitals, which meant there wasn't enough tissue to do the penile inversion surgery. This is utterly horrific. It is genital mutilation. It is murder from doctors who are using this and using these mental health issues as an excuse to perform entirely elective surgery that in this case had devastating consequences to this 18-year-old boy. But how did we even get here as a society? And how do we as Christians and conservatives look at this and even have a debate in a society that a large segment of these leftist Democrat progressives aren't even willing to recognize reality, self-evident truth that men are men and women are women? How do we even approach this? What can we do and how can we return? Well, my friend Auron MacIntyre from The Blaze will join me in just a moment to talk about all of that and more. With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to your to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you. So the best alternative headline to this really disgusting, morally reprehensible story that I saw on Twitter was from Auron MacIntyre, who is a host and also a columnist for the Blaze, and he tweeted this alternative headline: Doctors murder mentally ill 18-year-old. So Auron joins me now, and that's absolutely apt. I mean, it's incredible that the leftists are still saying that there is no harm in society at all or to anyone from the trans agenda, when plainly stories like this show that that's utterly false.
Yeah, this story really gives the lie to that in a lot of ways, on many levels. First, this story is actually relatively old. It's come up again because it was part of a study that's ongoing, and it shows that the patient in question had been on puberty blockers for a long time, and because they had been on puberty blockers when they were young, their genitalia did not properly develop. which already tells us the lie that puberty blockers are safe and that they're reversible and that they have no real side effects. Anyone who had any kind of brain in their skull knew that was a lie from the beginning. But it's very clear that we've known this for a long time, and everyone has been lying through their teeth about it. Medical professionals have been lying specifically on this issue. But on top of this, because of the effects of these puberty blockers, the subject was then, they were forced to do a different type of gender reassignment surgery using the colon of the individual. And apparently there seemed to be possibly an infection caused by the colon itself when they attempted to do this. And this ended up, being in the death of the subject. And this is just horrific because this person is 18 years old. They probably started these puberty blockers well before they had any ability to know what was going on. This irrevocably changed their body, even in a way that made it impossible for them to go through the transition they thought they wanted to go through in the first place. And the doctors involved here are entirely culpable.
Yeah, and I am an advocate for laws that would hold doctors responsible for these types of surgeries and prescribing puberty blockers and all of these things for minors in particular. And obviously, we need to have a larger conversation as a society in terms of what to do with adults who think that it's part of reality that they can transition genders anyways, and then force others like women in bathrooms or locker rooms, for example, to accept their expression of whatever they feel like. And we're seeing even more stories that are occurring of these males that are exposing themselves to young girls. And there was just another story just this past week that I saw that there was a male, a biological male who was 18, who is playing on some kind of sports team, went into the women's locker and exposed himself to 14-year-old girls who were shocked. And now if this was an actual woman who's 18 and goes into a locker room with 14-year-old girls, we have no problem legally, socially, morally. But now these blurred lines are suggesting that just because society is saying, okay, we need to accept people for the identity they prefer, then we are creating a nation of victims, not only these subjects themselves who as minors didn't have this choice, but now all of the other people like these girls in a locker room that certainly didn't have that choice, and they need to be protected from this kind of harm. So where do we even go from here as a society?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult because I don't know if you remember this, but almost a decade ago at this point, we had the Target showdown, right, about letting men into women's bathrooms as long as they were wearing the right clothing. And everything that was predicted by people this time who were told they were crazy, they were hyperbolic, they were insane, has come true. And even wilder things have come true to the point where now we have, men beating up women in sports, and we have, young girls getting preyed upon by men who pretend that they're, transgender so that they can go ahead and enter these spaces. Look, it's very simple. Everyone understood this. There's no kind of new technology here. We had segregated spaces in society because men and women are different. And there are certain spaces and certain activities in which they cannot coexist. And there has to be some honesty about what's going on here. There's simply, a lot of people want to reduce this down to consent. Well, children can't consent to this. They can't make these choices. The problem is, even when these people are adults, making these choices is predatory upon the rest of society. There's a simple truth about biology, a simple truth about reality here, a simple truth about the way that humans interact in society that prevents this from happening. And we simply can't allow really any portion of the population to force this delusion on the rest of society. It has too big of a cost.
And it is a delusion. I mean, this is where we can't even enter into a rational debate with anyone who is an advocate for the transgender movement, because it's not part of reality. And to assume that there's even a debate to be had is giving over ground to the leftists that this is even, logical in the first place. It would be like going in front of Congress and arguing and saying there's a legitimate debate to be had whether we want to repeal the law of gravity, or we want to legislate ourselves out of Earth's orbit. I mean, that's maybe just in a totally hypothetical sense, we could contemplate what that may look like if we actually had that power, but we can't do that because that's not the reality that humans are presented to in our empirical universe. And with the left saying they are such advocates of trust the science, they are never trusting the science when it comes to the agenda that they prefer. And so we always see that they manipulate the rules, that they will twist this arbitrarily. And so to even have these debates, I'm frankly tired of it, to say that this is even a conversation that we need to be having. And yet there are still people who are advocating that we need to change the law. And this is going to go down the slippery slope to say, okay, now, minor attracted persons, speaking of consent, now either children can consent in a very grotesque society, or it will be that you don't reach personhood until, 16, 18, whatever it is. And so there's really no actual victim here as long as, the parent knows, or, whatever the metric that these leftists want to prefer. And so, how do we even move forward as a society if we're not even having a conversation where both parties agree on the definition of reality?
Yeah, that's so important, I think, for conservatives, especially to understand. We've been told that everything is up for debate, that the marketplace of ideas will mediate every conflict. But what we have here is two disparate looks at moral visions, two completely different competing ideas of what the common good is and what reality is at this point. And when you're in that situation, there is no debate. To have the debate is to lose it. Men and women are fundamentally different. Children cannot be sexualized. There is no debate or discussion inside those bounds. And anyone attempting to start one with you is inevitably trying to completely destroy those boundaries. The left is already in a position where it's established childhood consent. We can already see this when it comes to transgenderism. A child can choose if it's a boy or girl, can choose whether or not they want to take puberty blockers that can, as we already see from this terrible example, destroy your life and end up getting you killed. They can choose whether or not they want to stay with a parent who doesn't acknowledge their gender, their preferred gender. We're already seeing courts looking to take away parental rights if they push back against this gender ideology. And remember, the reduction of the age of consent is something that was foundational to queer theory. This is something that people like Michel Foucault have pushed at the very beginning of this stuff. So none of this is new. As many people think this is very recent or new, it's something that just entered into the discussion recently. It's not. It's been there since the very beginning. This has been an agenda of at least a portion of the left for a very long time. And it's really ugly and it's really disturbing. But pretending it wasn't there is a mistake.
Yeah, and I think you do raise a really important point that conservatives have long said and are still saying that more speech is always better, and the free marketplace of ideas, the good will outweigh the bad, and so we need to have these types of debates where that's more of of almost in a sense an anarchist view of just, society is whatever the mob says, and there are no contours and boundaries and moral guidelines and things that we stay within that we agree as a well-ordered society, as the conservative tradition would recognize and our founders certainly recognized, are in place for a reason so that we don't go outside of that. And freedom and free expression is not just the ability to do whatever we want. And it's really disturbing to me to see how a lot of so-called conservatives are not understanding how they're actually succumbing to this idea that freedom means literally whatever we want it to mean. And they're championing that the government needs to stay out of their business as much as the left is suggesting that the government needs to stay out of their choices. And so if we just have this level playing field to say that anyone's choice needs to be accepted and even affirmed or celebrated, then those that are on the far right, even if they're well-intentioned, are actually supporting the leftist arguments. And so how do we get conservatives to understand that we still need moral bright lines in this country? And that's actually the common good.
Yeah, that is a huge deal. If you explained the current idea of conservative liberty to the founding fathers, they'd have looked at you like you were insane. They wouldn't have recognized this version of virtue or liberty or freedom, because all of these were constrained by a religious moral vision. Conservatives love to quote many founding fathers who say, the Constitution is not useful for people who don't follow the 10 Commandments. It's not fit for purpose to govern an irreligious people. But we are now, unfortunately, a society that is increasingly moving that direction. And pretending that you can still have the same level of liberty for people who think that liberty means that they can victimize children or they can warp, the understanding of reality when it comes to things like gender. It's just not possible. There's no way that these visions can coexist. Now, because our current government is really bad and it's run by bad people, I totally understand why people don't want to hand power over to the government to further regulate things. I very much understand that. I wouldn't want the Biden administration to have one more shred of power than it has now. But I think as conservatives, we need to understand that there is a difference between bad governance and good governance, that just because power in the hands of evil people does evil things does not mean that it is not necessary for some level of societal standard to be enforced when you don't have that going on. And it's a common misunderstanding for conservatives to say, oh, well, if you give any piece of power to the left, eventually they'll use it on you. Or if you take any piece of power, eventually the left will use it on you later on. Well, the left is already doing that anyway, right? As we can see, they'll lock you in your homes. They'll shut down your churches. They'll call one group of people, rioters and insurrectionists, while other people can take over state capitals and, barge in and, have no consequences. So it's very clear that the left is not particularly constrained by this idea of fair play. That's a scary place to be for sure. We'd like to be in a place where everyone is playing by the same rules, where we all have a shared vision of what the country should be, and we can all abide with some differences by kind of that understanding. But unfortunately, we are just not there at the moment. And it's something that we all have to acknowledge.
Yeah, and this whole diversity and kind of religious pluralism in society has really taken a drastic step for the worse, especially over the last century. If we look at the difference between what even conservatives would suggest about moral bright lines in society compared to what the founders, particularly James Madison and Federalist 41 and others, that didn't see government as an institution as inherently evil or something itself to be restrained for that purpose, but that men are evil. And that's why we need a government to restrain evil, but then have a government that itself is also restrained because it's run by fallible, evil people. And so they understood the complexity of the fallen view of man, which is itself a Judeo-Christian worldview principle. And yet in our society now, we think of whatever our identity or our particular viewpoints as sacrosanct, and that we, the people, are some kind of sovereign that is infallible, where the founders absolutely didn't see it that way. So I think that we need to get back from a much more kind of capital L libertarian view that would suggest that government should only arbitrate contract disputes and where there's consent, everything is always fine, even in issues of clear moral bright lines. Because if you allow for evil just based on consent in one instance, the principle then will allow for evil in almost any instance just based on consent. That can't be the principle. We have to go back to a genuine conservatism that recognizes the institution of government is actually an institution designed for our good, for the good of society, of everyone who lives and has to interact with each other. And then we can look and see, okay, how can we limit that institution? Because I agree with you. I don't want the Biden administration, or even Republicans for that matter, to have more power than they do. But I would love to see us return to a society that at least had moral boundaries and said it is okay for government to legislate against reprehensible objective evil. And so, in this conversation and in just the last few minutes that I have with you, Auron, this is such an important point that I feel like especially people our age and younger and then the next generation just really don't get this. So we're seeing an overlap between the leftists and the far right that are actually advocating the same thing. So how do we get back to a genuine conservatism that isn't looked at as, the antiquated kind of bygone era of Reagan?
Well, I think you're right that this consent-based morality is just civilizational acid. It doesn't just destroy, obviously we want government to be, working for the people, but we also want to understand that the other institutions, the church, the family, civic organizations, the things that used to mediate between the individual and the government were what created the social fabric that allowed us to have a functional society that didn't require the government to come bearing down on each one of those things. But you can't have that if you don't have those mediating institutions. And so we have to be in a place where we're willing to understand that we must strengthen the family, we must strengthen the church, we must strengthen the community if we're ever to get to a place where we can once again kind of have the kind of liberty that does not require a massive government to enforce these things, because they are being enforced culturally and in the community as well. But the government has to have a role. And I think conservatives have to understand that there is no such thing as a neutral institution. All of these institutions will communicate values. If they're not yours, they will be someone else's. And what happened was, in our current understanding of separation church of state, which is ridiculous, it's nothing like the founding fathers intended, but in our current understanding of separation of church and state, progressivism will always win in the marketplace because it's technically not a religion, and Christianity and Judaism and Islam technically are. They have holy books. Progressivism does not. So even though progressivism has all the prescriptive elements of a religion, it is not restricted by the separation of church and state, and therefore it becomes the only competitor in the marketplace of ideas. It's the only value system that your schools and that your government and your other institutions are legally allowed to advance. And so it has basically a legal monopoly on the moral conscience of the United States. And you have to break that. You have to get rid of this idea that progressivism is the null hypothesis. It's just the basic building block of how our society has to be. If we're going to get rid of wokeness, if we're going to get rid of leftism from these institutions, it's not enough to just strip those things out, because once they're stripped out, something will fill the void. We have to return to a place where conservatives are comfortable with advocating for a Christian worldview inside public institutions, because if it's not that, it will be something else.
So well said. And we have to get away from this notion that politics and government are the only sphere that we advocate for moral virtue. And the church and the family have largely abdicated their role in society to be some of these other adjudicators and arbitrators. And if you look at the span of how God ordained and designed the three institutions, how they were supposed to interact with each other, interestingly, the branch that was supposed to have the least power, the government, the civil society, and now has the most power, just like the judicial branch was designed to be the weakest, but it has the most power because that's how everyone is very easily manipulating the entire system to have their preferred outcomes. And so if we do strengthen the church and we strengthen the family, then by necessity, we will weaken the influence of the government. And I think that's a brilliant point, that conservatives are looking too much to the government and these politicians to be like their religious leaders. And we see that in some of the personality cults in the following and the myopic focus on politics, instead of taking a step back and saying, we need to instead focus our attention on strengthening the church, being part of the family institution and the church institution so that we don't have to pay as much attention to government. So really important points. And Auron, really appreciate your insights and conversation today. And so where can people find you at the Blaze and follow your work?
Absolutely. You can catch everything over on BlazeTV. My columns appear at the Blaze. I've also got a YouTube channel, Rumble, Odyssey, for anybody who wants to watch over there. And then they can subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre podcast as well.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and commentary. Look forward to having you on again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you. Hello, friends. I'm Jenna Ellis, host of The Jenna Ellis Show on the Salem Podcast Network. And if you are like me and you've been looking at all of these controversies over woke businesses and corporations over the last few years that care a lot more about their diversity, equity, and inclusion score than they do about consumers and patriots like you and me, then you need to make a difference and vote with your dollars. Stop funding these woke corporations and go to businesses that are with products that are made in the USA and actually support the family values that you and I do. Go to patriotsareswitching.com with over 450 products in this online marketplace and growing. This is the largest gathering of patriotic consumers and business owners that actually champion and share our values. So go to patriotsareswitching.com, make a difference, and vote with your dollars today.
Have you ever picked up a towel set because it felt so soft in the store, but then when you leave and you go to use it, it's not really that absorbent? It's basically a towel that is leaving you out to dry. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels, towels that actually work. I know, it's totally mind-blowing. Towels that actually dry you. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors. I have the sage green and the white. I love them. And right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $39.98 with promo code Jenna. That's JENNA. So go to mypillow.com right now and click on the radio listeners special. MyPillow products come with a 10-year warranty and have a 60-day money-back guarantee. So to receive this amazing offer on the 6-piece towel set of MyPillow towels, just go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and enter promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, or call 1-800-564-8475. That's mypillow.com, promo code Jenna.